So welcome to the third annual My Sister's Keeper Alumni Career Panel, Embracing Opportunities and Challenges. I'm Helen Elaine Lee, professor on the writing side of comparative media studies writing and director of the program in Women's and Gender Studies. I want to thank our panelists for their generosity in coming to share their stories, and my co-organizers, Latari Canty, Assistant Dean, Office of Multicultural Programs, and Dianetta Jones-Creighton, Associate Dean for Undergraduate Education and Director of the Office of Minority Education. Dianetta had a conflict. It's also McVicker Day, but she'll be here for part of the program. And I want to thank the WGS Program Director Emily Neal and Program Manager Emily Neal and Program Assistant Sophia Hassenfuss for, as usual, making this event happen with their hard work on publicity, logistics, and mechanics, and all of you for being here. So this year, we are fortunate to hear 5 recent graduates talk about their experiences. With us today are Margaux Beatty, Dextina Booker, Tiera Fletcher, Victoria Okuneye, and Jazmin Washington. So I'm going to introduce each speaker before they give their remarks, and after all 5 has spoken, we'll have time for questions and answers. So first, Margaux Beatty, whose pronouns are they, them, theirs, is currently pursuing a PhD in nuclear engineering at the University of California, Berkeley. Their current research focuses on developing unique methods to enable the detection of inadvertent or deliberate holdup of fissionable material in reprocessing facilities. Margaux earned a bachelor's degree in both nuclear engineering and physics from MIT in 2014 and a master's degree in medical physics from the University of Wisconsin-Madison before continuing on to UC Berkeley. And Margaux's interests include recruitment, retention, and advocacy for minority students in the sciences. All right, so what do you think? Should I introduce everybody or introduce them one by one? Okay, so, okay, and then you'll speak in this order though, right? Okay, okay, Dextina Booker is a Brooklyn native with Caribbean roots. Her mother emigrated from Guyana when she was young and raised Dextina to believe that she has a duty to create a better future. During undergrad, Dextina studied mechanical engineering at MIT and graduated in 2015. She packed up and moved her life to Detroit, my hometown, as a Venture for America Fellow with the hopes of creating jobs through entrepreneurship. Her third and final job in her 2 years in Detroit was with Shinola Branding and Manufacturing Company, known for its stylish and American-designed watches, bikes, and leather goods. Dextina worked as an engineer on the audio team where they created turntables, speakers, and headphones. After a year and a half with Shinola, she decided to return to MIT to pursue a master's degree in integrated design and management. She hopes to use her skills to build solutions for those who need them most. Tiera Fletcher graduated from MIT Course 16 in 2017. During her senior year at MIT, Tiera also worked as a part-time rocket structural design and analysis engineer at the Boeing Company, specifically working on NASA's Space Launch System. As a student, Tiera worked in the Manned Vehicle Laboratory, the Gelb Laboratory, and the Space Systems Laboratory at MIT. As a recipient of the Albert G. Hill Prize, she served as the co-chair of BSU and the co-chair of BWA. At Boeing, she worked as a rocket structural analysis engineer in Huntsville, Alabama, and now she's supporting the build of the rocket as a rocket design engineer in New Orleans at NASA's Michaud Assembly Facility. Outside of work, she focuses on encouraging youth through mentorship and public speaking. She has been featured in USA Today, Huffington Post, Guidepost, Essence, MIT News, and Glassdoor, to name a few publications. This past year, she has been featured in Good Housekeeping as a 2017 Awesome Woman of the Year. And This Is Ground as a groundbreaking pioneer. in Coder Dojo's Ireland Coolest Projects as a keynote speaker, and Odyssey Business Network Retreat as an honoree. She has her own day, Tiera Gwynn Day, at Lindley Middle School, where she received the Georgia Citizen Award at its initiation. Tiera and her husband, Myron Fletcher, created a public speaking business, Rocket with the Fletchers, which they will expand into a nonprofit organization, scholarship foundation, and tutoring program in the near future. Currently, Victoria Okuneye is a fourth year, sorry. Got ahead of myself. Currently, Victoria Okuneye is a fourth year in the MD PhD program at University of Chicago Pritzker School of Medicine. Victoria specializes in computational neuroscience, and her research focuses on using the MRI to study the neurobiology of hallucinations and delusions in psychotic spectrum disorders such as schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. When she grows up, Victoria hopes to become an academic psychiatrist, continuing to investigate human behavior and mental health while using her position to advocate for the mental health of her patients and more broadly for minority and low resource communities. As an undergrad at MIT, Victoria majored in course 9, lived in Newhouse, house 2, and consistently overwhelmed herself by drinking too much from the fire hose. Yet Victoria looks back on her time at MIT very fondly. Pause. Okay, and Jazmin Washington graduated in 2014 with a bachelor's degree from the MIT Sloan School of Management. While at MIT, she was actively involved in the Black Women's Alliance, the National Society of Black Engineers, the Black Students Union, and the CAC Advisory Board. After graduating, Jazzmyne joined the Vanguard Group in their Accelerated Development Program, rotating through several departments before launching as a supervisor for the Investment Data Management team. In 2016, Jazzmyne returned to Cambridge to serve as the program coordinator for the MIT Online Science, Technology, and Engineering Community, MOSTEC, program with the Office of Engineering Outreach Programs. Originally from Wisconsin, Jazzmyne enjoys musical theater, spades, traveling, and cooking in her free time. So please, let's have a round of applause for everybody. Okay, and then they'll share their wisdom in turn, and then we'll have some questions and answers.
That's me. So, wisdom. Nah, I'm just playing. So, I guess one of the things I wanted to share is about my indirect path to where I am today. It sounds linear, bachelor's, master's, PhD, but the process of getting here was very non-linear. So originally from Los Angeles, California, went to MIT, thought I wanted to do physics, ended up really not liking physics, and kept pushing through it as time went on just because people kept saying, oh, it might get better, like, oh, you might like this. So 801 liked it. I was like, okay, cool. 802, electricity and magnetism, hated it. They're like, oh, try waves and optics, 803, hated it. Oh, try quantum, hated it. Oh, try special relativity, hated it. So I look up and I'm 85% done with my degree, right? So it's like, there's nothing really else to like. So then in physics, you can do what's called the physics flexible program, where you do a concentration in a different department. And so I still wanted to very much so graduate on time. So I chose something where my physics curriculum could apply for prerequisites for that class. And that ended up being nuclear engineering. And so I went with nuclear, started taking a couple classes, and then a lot of the requirements overlapped. And then by the time senior year rolled around, they were like, you're eligible for a double major. And I was like, sure, why not? And so for a while, coming from South Central Los Angeles, first of all, I had never been in a classroom with a white student until college. And so the culture shock coming here was unable to be described with words. And so I get here, and I immediately notice that, like, now my teachers no longer look like me, my classmates no longer look at me, and I cannot harp enough on how much representation means to students when we're in these student positions, right? And so from pretty much the jump, I realized that I wanted to become a professor. So grad school was always the way for me. I knew that I wanted to get a PhD. I wanted to be one of the people who can influence change on institutional level. And so I went and tried nuclear engineering, ended up really liking it to the point where I was like, I can probably do a PhD in this. So I applied to on the order of 8 programs. And then senior spring, right around the time acceptances start rolling in, I took a class called Radiation Biophysics, which is only offered every other year in my department. Ended up loving this class. And so this is after I got in all my acceptances and realized I didn't want to do nuclear engineering anymore. And, and so that was a problem, right? I had only been accepted to certain departments at certain universities. And so fortunately enough, Wisconsin was flexible enough to be able to let me go in with funding 1 year, and if I chose to, find additional funding for my subsequent years in either medical physics or nuclear engineering. And so I committed to Wisconsin for 2014 and attended and ended up really enjoying a smaller subset of medical physics called biomagnetism. So medical physics, just to give you an idea, is the study of physics as it relates to medicine, right? So in essence, that is 2 main branches. So medical imaging, so we're the people who do the algorithms for MRI, PET, SPECT, ultrasound, CT. All those devices are calibrated, are optimized by medical physicists. And also the other main branch is radiation therapy. So we're the people who, if somebody has cancer, their radiation oncologist diagnoses it, and then the medical physicist is the one who comes up with the treatment plan about how to supply what amount of dosage over what period of time. So you need to be very well knowledgeable in both the human body and also the physics as it relates to radiation interactions and matter. And so this is what I thought I wanted to do, switched completely to a smaller subset called biomagnetism, just the study of magnets in the body. So I ended up using a really expensive cryogenically cooled magnetic field detector to detect baby heartbeats. And so with that, pregnant women whose babies were at risk for certain types of heart defects would come in, and with our device, we'd image them and diagnose them, and we had a fetal cardiologist on site, and we treat them. They would treat them. I was the physics portion of it, so primarily detection. So then over time, I realized that Wisconsin wasn't the place for me for a variety of reasons that I'm happy to expand on later. But long story short, I was very uncomfortable being Black and queer in Wisconsin, both individually and at the same time. Collectively, that intersectionality caused for a lot of discomfort that ultimately resulted in me being willing to leave a program entirely to pursue a degree somewhere else. And so my Wisconsin experience was very much so one that I don't regret, but one where I learned how to advocate for myself in ways I would not have had I gone somewhere else or had I stayed at MIT. So I'm very appreciative for it, and decided around fall 16, that I wanted to go somewhere else. And so Berkeley, I had very good connections with them. I really wanted to go there at the time, but they didn't have medical physics at the time. And in those 3 years I was at Wisconsin, they had developed a concentration program within the nuclear engineering department. So after a phone call and an application, 8 months later, I was a full-time grad student there. And so I work with the radiation detection group there, and it's not perfect. Institutions all have their issues, but I'm very much so happy with my move. So that was like the overarching school route, and I'm happy to talk about other experiences I had. So I was also on the BSU exec board, the NSBE exec board. I was on the Student Athletic Advisory Council. I played varsity basketball for 2 years here. I was captain of the rugby team for 2 years here. In Wisconsin, I played adult women's rugby and won the national championship my first year there. And I started the Black Grad Student Association there. And so there's a lot of things that I did in my free time beyond academics to help keep me sane, needless to say. But now I'm at Berkeley focusing on getting this degree. So that's where I'm at.
So I'm from Brooklyn, home of the greatest rappers, Debate Your Mom. And I got to MIT and felt a very similar experience with the culture shock. We had 3 white students in my high school, but I mean, 3 is not compared to MIT at all. Like, it was a lot going on here. And I think I had a really hard time adjusting in the first couple of years all the years at MIT, because just gonna be honest. No, I came from a high school where, our AP classes had been canceled, and that was it. We just didn't have them anymore. And I didn't feel prepared academically. I'm sure a lot of people don't feel prepared. And I went to the secondary school for law, also known as John Jay, way back. And then they split it into 3 schools because it was really dangerous. And anyway, so when I got to MIT, I felt very unprepared, and I started to just take on a lot of activities and go to a lot of events and kind of, do the whole like drinking from the fire hose thing, just getting really, really involved. And it wasn't until maybe some time after MIT that I understood like what I was doing that wasn't constructive for me. It really took some time away to understand that like I wasn't appreciating MIT for being one of the most difficult places to go to school, or being one of the best universities and the best university in the world. Like, I wasn't appreciating that because I couldn't. I could just think about how this felt very difficult, and that I had to get through today, and I had to get through that P set, and I had to get through this year, and then the summer, and then get through graduating. It just felt like I just had to make it through these things. After MIT, I studied mechanical engineering. I was the co-chair of BWA my sophomore year, and I was involved with a lot of other things. But yeah, so after MIT, I decided to join Venture for America and go to Detroit, of all places, because I wanted an adventure, I guess. I just thought that that I really wanted to make sure that my job was impact-oriented, and that I wasn't working on something that I could easily find myself bored with. And so I thought, yeah, let's go work for startups. And the first startup I worked for pivoted, and so that was about 6 weeks before that fell through. And I'm just in Detroit, like, I don't have a job, but I have this new apartment and all these responsibilities, but okay. And then I started working for the company that funded that startup. And so for about 4.5 months, I was just looking at the startups in Detroit, seeing which ones were viable, which ones we should invest in, and trying to convince people to come to Detroit. And in the middle of doing that, I started to realize that, like, I felt like I was just on the wrong side. 'Cause in Detroit, like, I'm sure you guys hear a lot about it, but it just seems like all of the opportunities that are being created are for a certain group of people, and it's not for the people who've been there for so long. And I just started to have to deal with feeling like I was on the wrong side. Like, people started to shoot, they wanted to shoot a documentary about Detroit, and then it just ended up being about 6 Venture for America fellows. And that's not Detroit. Like, we were just some kids that thought that we could go create jobs, and that's like really, really ambitious and really awesome, and we really thought. But we came to find out that, like, there was just so much more than our program and what we thought we were doing. So then after working for that the second company, I decided to work for Shinola, and we started their audio team when I first started there. And I really liked the story that we were creating these jobs in Detroit, that, we were bringing back manufacturing. These are the skill sets that are already here. We should do more of that, so that we're working to employ people with the skill sets that are actually present, instead of inviting more people like me from outside to come do the work. And I think what I started to notice was that I am not one to blindly follow anyone's vision. I thought the world worked a certain way when I was younger. Like, people who are in charge are there because they know what they're talking about. And I started to learn that that was not the case. It's just sometimes people happen into situations. Sometimes they earn it. You know, sometimes people are really good at making a product, but not good at leading a team. And it's just a realization that I started to have. And I think towards the end of my time at Shinola, I was just thinking, I don't see myself putting my all behind another man's vision. Because it's not exactly what I need it to be. It's never gonna be like the actual, I don't know anyone else's intentions the way that I know mine. And so I have a lot more faith in what I'm willing to do, and the integrity that I'm trying to have with everything that I do. And so I decided that it was time for me to go back to school. Like, I wanted to learn about manufacturing, and I spent 1.5 years at this startup and was the expert in the room. And that's not where I wanted to be. I wanted to be learning. And so I applied to a few different schools, had like probably somewhere in the back of my head thought that I would come back to MIT, but like really, really far in the back, like really deep. Like, I don't know why I was kind of lying to myself, I guess, but I actually, I saw Victoria a little bit before I moved back to MIT and was like, yeah, I'm going to UPenn, like I'm moving to Philly. And that was supposedly my decision, but then I ended up coming back here, and I think it's a completely different experience. Like, Margo was talking about how earlier, a lot of people don't really sit you down and tell you what grad school is or how to get there or what it means for you or what it even looks like in comparison to undergrad. And I had all of these ideas about what it meant to go to MIT that I just didn't imagine that I would be going back to pursue education anywhere. I just thought I didn't like to learn anymore. And it took some time to realize that it wasn't that I didn't like to learn, it was that I just had a difficult time the first time around. But grad school is different, so that's nice. Yeah, and I could probably talk to you about the grad school experience and, you know, finessing your way to other people's countries all the time, and because that was my main skill during undergrad, was getting out of here. So if y'all want to talk about that, you can do that.
Hi, y'all. Hey, everybody. I've been in the South a lot the past year. Back to my Southern roots. But yes, okay. So, yeah. Wisdom. See. I know, right? It's a lot of pressure. These jewels right here, they've been out the game longer than me, but all right, where can I start? So, yeah, my name is Tiera. Hi. Some of you may know me. I just graduated last year. And MIT for me was interesting. Yeah, just like Dextina said, I didn't plan on coming back here for a while. You can ask Nakaya and Ashley. I was like, you guys, I can meet you in Florida. But Boston, I don't know. But on a real note, I came from a small town outside of Atlanta, Georgia, called Mableton. Probably never heard of it, right? Anybody been to Six Flags over Georgia? Okay, it's right up the street from Six Flags. That's what I always tell people. And for me, coming to Boston, it was just a huge change, right? I'm going from warm to freezing. I'm going from Southern hospitality to rudeness, straight up. And it was just very different. And then also on top of that, I went to a high school that was fantastic. It was out of my school district, so I had to make some sacrifices to get there. But it really did prepare me for MIT, but I still wasn't exactly mentally prepared, just in myself. I didn't really think that I could do it. I was like, I'm gonna be lonely and miserable. There's like nobody to talk to, it's cold, and I don't know if I can do this thing. So I committed to Georgia Tech, and I had to put a stop payment on my credit card because I then decided on MIT. And and that was with the help of Dextina over here. She was my host for CPW, and she showed me a different side of MIT. I was like, there's color here. People have fun. That's pretty cool. And I had an allergic reaction during CPW. I almost died, and she was there for me.
Very scared. You don't even, oh my God.
So I felt an actual support system at a place that I thought was just so cold and gray. Still great and kind of cold, but not in that sense, right? So I decided on MIT. I come up here, and I'm like, there's a bunch of people who don't look like me, and I have to find those organizations that Dextina showed me. And so I got super involved in BSU and BWA. And then there was a huge kind of stump in the road when my best friend passed away. And I was like, oh my God, because he was back in Georgia. So that really interrupted my mindset that I had prepared. I took so much time to prepare. But it also made me stronger. So I did much better after his passing than before. So I was just like, I was just doing it because I knew how proud he was. And so continuing on, freshman year, I'm super involved, and I'm having a ton of fun as well. I think I went to the movies every week. I really took advantage of passing a record. And look, I didn't say it was my money, but I went to the movies every week. And I had so much fun. I joined, what is it called? Dance troupe? It's been a minute, yeah. Joint dance troupe. Look, it feels like longer, but it feels like longer. And I was super, super involved. And then on top of that, I think I was taking 5 classes and 2 seminars. I was doing the most. You can ask Latari. She made me make a priority list to figure out what things I had to let go of because I was just, yes. Yes, Latari. Yes, I was a mess. And so going on a sophomore year, I'm core 16, right? So Unified comes. And yeah, I know. And at that point, I knew that I had to have the correct mindset. Because if I kept that whole, oh, God, then I probably wouldn't have made it. So I just had to focus on the fact of what I'm going to be doing when I get out. So Unified was actually quite nice for me. I had a lot of fun. I went to office hours all the time. And I just had a really good lab partner that I stuck through the entire time as well, all the way through senior year, as a matter of fact. And I just tried to make the best out of the situation because I knew that it was just for that year and I was going to make it through if I just stuck to it. So doing that, and then I get super, super involved in things. I become co-chair of BWA at that point, and then I move on to be co-chair of BSU, and Latari's like, really? Really, Tiera? We just had this whole breakdown session. You're doing this. But, and then I get really involved in Cicada. Have you guys heard of Cicada? African dance team? Whoop, whoop. Yeah. So I was super involved in that. And that was my outlet. So all of that stress and anger and whatever else I had built up, I would just pop it out. And it was amazing. It was fantastic. And let's rewind a little bit. Sophomore year, that's when I went to the career fair and I saw Boeing. There was a long line and I was like, oh, these kids, oh, geez, I don't even know if I can do this. But I decided to wait it out. And I talked to one of the representatives and he was just so receptive. I didn't even go into academics. I was just talking about who I am as a person and what I'm looking for in a company. And we just had a down-to-earth conversation. It didn't really seem like an interview. And then he was like, okay, so we're going to do an interview, and I'll see you soon. Interview happens that following Monday, and then they call that afternoon. I'm freaking out. I'm like, oh my God, I got an internship with Boeing. Because, okay, at the time I wanted Lockheed, but they couldn't work the tablets right. And it was just really frustrating. Yeah, it didn't make any sense. I was like, how come they have this representative that can't even work a tablet? Anyway, but, yeah, I know. Shame on me. But I decided to go with Boeing, and I have to say that it was probably the best decision that I made during my college career. It was fantastic. So I go to the matching event, and at this point, I'm like, I want to go to a location that's decent. I end up in Alabama, and I'm like, I've never wanted to go to Alabama or Mississippi. So this is, okay, I'll try it, because I literally tried to get transferred to South Carolina because it was right by the water. It's the new facility, you know, and then that didn't work. So I was like, all right, God, you're trying to close the door. I got you. So I go to Alabama, go to Huntsville, and Huntsville is very different from the rest of Alabama. They have a huge amount of PhD holders in such a small area, and it's just an amazing city. It's Rocket City. So I start off with BR&T, Boeing Research and Technology, and I was doing stuff that I did not like to do but it was a door opener, right? So I talked to my coworkers. They were all system engineers, and I let them know about my passion for design engineering. And one of my coworkers, he's like, you know what? I know somebody that you can talk to. So that's how I met my husband. My coworker introduced me to him, design engineer, all came together. And I also ended up meeting my current manager, which was fantastic, and going into the Space Launch System program with NASA. So, okay, that's that summer. And then the next summer, I go back to Huntsville working on SLS, Space Launch System. And then I decided to continue on working throughout the entire academic year because I figured that some extra money wouldn't hurt. And I also wanted to just be super involved in the program. And that was difficult. It was so hard because I really had to manage my time and just make sure that I was getting all portions of my life in balance. Because at this point, I'm planning for a wedding, and I'm like, oh my God, so much to do. But it was all worth it in the end. So I graduate, and I'm like, okay, things might calm down a little bit. Well, of course, after the wedding in July, because that happened too. And then I started full-time in August, and I'm in Huntsville at this point. I'm like, I'm living my dream. This is awesome. About maybe 3 weeks pass, and I'm like, this is very different than I imagined. Because I'm doing structural analysis, and with structural analysis, it's very computationally based, right? So you're just on a computer all day. You're not really interacting with people. And then you get headaches and your eyes hurt. And it's just like, it just wasn't my thing. Long story short, I felt like it was just, like I was back in, it just felt just torturous. It was just, ugh. And so I'm like, I have to do something about this because my outreach was my outlet as well because I love kids so much. So being able to talk to them about the space program, about following their dreams and passions, that just fulfilled me. That was great. So I'm like, I have to figure out a way to balance it so that I'm doing exactly what I want to do. So then my husband calls me and says that he has to travel to New Orleans every other week because he has a new position as a test engineer. And I'm like, New Orleans, the rocket is there. I can find something. So I talked to a few managers, and I ended up finding a position with design engineering mostly, but I could still use my structural analysis background. So I was like, let's make this happen. So we're both on temporary assignment in New Orleans at NASA's Michoud Assembly Facility. So literally every rocket that NASA has ever made has gone through this facility. So it's just this historical place. It's so amazing. I'm crawling into the engine section every day, literally crawling. That's probably a safety hazard, but you know, we try and make things happen. And I have to work with the technicians to make sure the installations are correct. So I'm a task lead at the moment. And it's just so liberating and fun. I'm working with hardware. I'm talking to people. I'm just doing what I love to do. And on top of that, I have a chance to do outreach. So I travel maybe every weekend. And so I have a very supportive manager, as you can imagine. And he really loves that I do outreach as well. So finding people to support you, to actually like understand your passions and not just want to squeeze work out of you is so important. So that's me.
Hello. I'm the oldest one at this table, so most of you probably do not recognize me. Oh yes, there's a couple I recognize. You know, there might be a poster or two. Oh, no, I'm kidding. So I was class of 2013, and so I came in to MIT from Minnesota. That's where I mostly grew up. Okay. I mean, it's Minnesota. But I was born in Atlanta, but, you know, I can't really claim it because people would be like, anyway. And so what was MIT to me, it was like basically liberation. When I came to MIT, it was like, I'm going to get mine, finally. I I don't know. I don't know how many of you are just like waiting for college. That was me my entire life. I'm working towards this goal. Mom, like, just take me here. Like, you know, I'll get school paid for. Look, they say they'll pay for everything. Like, nah. And so MIT was that for me. And so I did MITES. And that was also a seminal to my decision to come to MIT. I think before I did MITES, I really thought of MIT as like an inaccessible place, you know, for me. Like, you know, I was like, I'm smart, but I'm what they kind of called a chronic underachiever. And so that was kind of my profile in high school. And so I didn't really get challenged until I came into MITES. I didn't like ever reach a wall where I actually had to like push myself and like work and, you know, go over that. So it was all about the delta. I don't know if we still have that, but that was, you know, our motto. And that was a really important thing that I had to learn. And I think when we actually got to MIT though, I think it was another challenge to learn socially, you know, how to thrive here, like how not to just surpass in academics and things like that. I had a lot of challenges adjusting to MIT, like just as a social fit. And I think I look back on it now and I talk to students, I'm like, at any point in your life, you know, there's going to be lots of transition points, you know, where you have to start over, where you have to build a community from scratch. You know, you have to figure out what you like, what you don't like, and it's going to be hard. And those are like the times that like check you. You know, like, you know, I was like depressed for at least the first semester of MIT. You know, I would just like go hide in my room, you know, just feel like really lonely. And I just didn't really have a lot of perspective during that time that it was gonna get better. I did track and field also for the first year. And while I loved pole vaulting, which is what I did, and some high jumping, I was also really, really depressed doing that. You know, I would dread going to practice. I would sleep on those green couches in the middle of the infinity quarter, like just to rest before practice. And I would have to like, the struggle to get me to like go at 5 o'clock, I was like, oh my God. But it wasn't until I guess when I moved on later in the year, you know, that I started like, I guess making those choices for me, realizing that, you know, maybe I should quit track. Maybe I don't have to do things that aren't making me happy. You know? And then also started to find community. I was, like I said, I lived in house 2 all 4 years of MIT, you know, and I loved that, most of it. Like, I mean, I didn't love like the dripping walls and floods and all that other stuff, but, you know, but the community, I love that, you know, and my single, I love that. But, yeah, it was gross. But I'm glad they're renovating it. And so I think that community was really strong for me, like that it did start to build. You know, I lent on a lot, I think what a lot of people have, you know, Interphase, MITES, House 2, the cultural groups. So I guess basically what ended up happening is I started to slowly but surely form a really strong like community. And you don't really even know what's happening. You know, it's just like, you're like, okay, this is an acquaintance. This is this person. Like, you know, can I even like visit them in their like dorm room? And then I think by the, like sophomore, 3rd year, you know, you're like traveling out of the country with these people, at least for me. You know, you're doing these projects together and you're like, wow, like these are my like lifelong best friends. And you know, so that was really rewarding for me in terms of like, I think just from where I came from when I started MIT, not feeling like I was ever gonna have a community, especially when you're like one of the few like Black girls, and you know, just how we fit into, I don't know how, hopefully it's getting better, you know, I hear positive things, but it's like how we fit into this space was really, really awkward when I was at MIT. It was like, this place was not really made for us. We were sort of like this afterthought. And it just felt like kind of like you're always in the shadow. Like I enjoyed things about MIT, but like you're always in like the shadow, like in sort of as a Black female. So anyway, outside of all of those social things, I did some academics. And those were good and those were bad. I was pre-med, you know, almost my entirety of MIT. I don't know if anyone's pre-med here. okay, that's a smart decision. This is not really necessarily the ideal place to be pre-med. This gives a lot of stress in a place that's already stressful. And so I came in kind of pre-med, interested in course 9 and actually physics. And I will like just co-author like how much representation matters, because I really like struggled in my whole like, you know, extra first year and a half of like, can I do physics too? Will I double major? And I tried and I tried and I tried, and I was lonely as hell. Like, I didn't feel like I had people to do P-sets with. When I struggled, I didn't know who to go to. Like, it was just like, and when I saw you guys, you know, sticking it through, I was like, I knew you guys were doing what you got to do. Cause it was too much for me. And I was like, so that was another me quitting something that wasn't making me happy. My major wars or like conflict that I had in my team, which wasn't really a conflict, was just like figuring out what path I was going to go down, because I was kind of pre-med, but I was also really interested in international development, global health, like all these sort of initiative stuff. And there was all these opportunities that were so exciting about MIT. Like, I left the country for the first time when I came to MIT. Did Misty first summer in Mexico, and I was like, well, will this fit in with my pre-med like route and all these things? And I didn't know. And I did all these education like projects in like Jamaica and other like places, and it just didn't necessarily fit like the script of what I was doing. And it was kind of like I had to figure out, you know, along the way how to like make it work. And you realize after a while that there's all like a lot of valuable experiences that really contribute to who you are and the things that you learn, regardless of whether they're like, you know, supposed to be for your like goal vision of yourself. So like I became just, you know, like travel lust. I just have all that now. But also I learned about how I could sort of meld the vision of what I wanted for myself. I really was interested in science and like neuroscience, but I really, really was more committed to the idea of how I could make an impact, you know, on people's lives and things like that. So somehow along the way, I came up with this like narrative or vision that I would become an MD PhD, and I would use that position as hopefully a professor to get involved in global mental health and into basic public policy. So right now I do like schizophrenia research, which is actually really, really rewarding for me, because that's kind of a devastating disease. But it's also, you know, so working with those people to see them so excited to like give back to science to help improve it for others and maybe even one of themselves, it really pushes me to do things. Like, I realized, I don't know if it was the fire hose aspect, like I kind of got tired of learning too. Like, I really like to learn, but MIT kind of wears you out. And so I realized I needed something to keep me motivated. And it was really knowing the impact of my work that keeps me motivated. And so I realized I needed that, both for my research and for other things. I don't know. None of you are pre-med, so that's pretty good. So I could tell you more about the grad school application process, things like that, but, you know, it's good. I guess the only other thing I would add is, so in general, I'm sure they beat this, you know, horse like often. At every stage along the way, even as you like acquire different accomplishments and different levels, you still have to fight that like check that says like you can't do this, you know, or that, what do you call it, imposter syndrome. And I think like the latest one for me is I came in wanting to do computational neuroscience, but that has like, you know, when I thought of computational, I thought of like the course 6 folks, you know, and like all the little fancy Pythons and the scripts and the things, you know, that they were doing. And I was like, those G's, like, that's not for me, but like, you know, it's really interesting how they're applying those things to the work they're doing. And so I've started to want to apply that work now. So I'm in a machine learning class at this moment. And it's really, I guess, just incredible to realize that like the things that you say aren't for you, like, are because you put that barrier up, you know? Like, they had to start somewhere too, you know, with Square Run, with Hello World, with all those whatever stuff. And there's really nothing that you can't do too that others are doing. Like, you just have to find your own way and route through it. So, but just so you know, you're always gonna have to have that voice in the back of your head just checking you, and you have to check it. Okay, I'll let you go.
It's just so nice seeing everybody. So one, I just want to preface this and say, just like all of us, we're sharing a piece of our, we're sharing about our career path and where we are now, which is a piece of our story, but it's not your entire story. And so I know something I've struggled with is not letting my career define me and what I've accomplished define me. So I would just encourage you all to do the same, whether it's good or bad. And so, yeah, so similar to Victoria, my first taste of MIT was mites. And I'm originally from Wisconsin, and so I had a different experience. I didn't have a black friend until the 6th or 7th grade. So when I came to mites, it was like, ooh, all these brown people. And I loved it. But it was also like, ooh, this is hard. And I did not do well with hitting a wall. I tried to leave. I tried to quit halfway through. Shauna right there didn't let me. I was ready to hop on a plane at the age of 17 and quit this program. But Shauna and all my great CAs really helped push me to see, okay, you can't be successful. You just have to, believe in yourself and put in some effort and go to office hours, because I wasn't good at that either. So I say all that to say is that I learned that summer that I did not want to study STEM, but I did learn that MIT was a place that I could push myself, and that is what led me to come here. So a lot of my MIT undergraduate career was defined as not being a STEM major and feeling a sort of stigma go along with that during my time here. So I was a course 14 major for the first 3 years, and then I switched to course 15 my senior year. And so a lot of that time, again, people say that MIT looks so different because, like Margo Dextina said, from their home communities, where for me, it was like, oh my gosh, I can join the Black Student Union, I can join Black Women's Alliance, I can join the National Society of Black Engineers. I just saw a lot of Black people for the first time in my life. So for me, I think I had a different reaction, whereas this is really where I felt that I got to connect with people who look like me and who are interested in doing great things like me. So during my time here, I was really involved with a lot of organizations. The two I was probably involved with the most are the National Society of Black Engineers. I was on the exec board of that organization for all 4 years, and then the Office of Engineering Outreach Programs, which does the MITES and most Tech and E2 programs. And I think, at that time, I was really passionate about those organizations. I love putting my time and effort into them more than my academics, which I probably shouldn't have. But I think even though I knew I had that passion, a lot of times I told myself, I'm here compensating for something. I'm working with these engineering-based organizations because I'm not a STEM major, and this is how I kind of prove my worth type of thing. But I was really passionate. I was really passionate about education. I was really passionate about helping others, especially underrepresented individuals. And that passion is really what, got me through those organizations, which in turn helped support me through my undergraduate career. I spent most of my summers working for the OEOP. So I spent, my freshman summer working as a MITE TA, my sophomore summer working with MITE and E2. My junior summer came along and people were like, all right, well, you got to get a real job, quote unquote real job. You want to go into business. That was my goal at the time, to do something in business. Didn't know what, so I had to go get a business job. And so I joined a program called MLT, Management Leadership for Tomorrow, Management Leaders for Tomorrow. And that program basically pairs you with a coach and kind of helps you, get internships, full-time jobs, et cetera. And it's geared towards minorities, URM students particularly. And so I joined that program, and I got a coach. And I was like, oh, look at all these great jobs on this list that you guys posted. This is what I'm interested in. And my coach was like, you don't have the GPA to apply to those jobs. And I was like, okay, I know my GPA is low, so I'm not going to argue with you there. But in hindsight, this is going to be filled with a lot of lessons. Learn from my mistakes. In hindsight, what I wish I had done is push back on my coach a little bit more. Because basically she was basing that off of at most 3, but I think 2 semesters worth of coursework at that time, because you applied during your sophomore year. So it's not like I had put that much time in my GPA. So what I wish I did and say, okay, I don't have the GPA now. What can I do to supplement that? Or what can I do to get there? Or when I finally get that GPA, how can I enter this space? And I didn't. I kind of just accepted that here was a realm of jobs that weren't in my purview, that I just didn't have access to because I wasn't smart enough, and I let it go. I already had a sense of inadequacy being a non-STEM major, so I just added that to the list. So I ended up working at Target for my summer internship. Not a bad job. It was great. I had a lot of fun. I learned a lot, so I worked specifically with the pricing team. So we did all the Target.com pricing mechanisms to make sure they're competitive with like Walmart.com, Amazon, et cetera. So a lot of analysis, a lot of data work, and work I really enjoyed, but it was retail. And you know, I still had that feeling of inadequacy in the back of my mind, even though I did enjoy the work. And so I left Target with the full-time offer, and I kind of took that in my back pocket and said, you know, okay, I have this offer, so let me go see what else I can get. I have a cushion now. So that kind of helped me be a little bit more secure in going out and trying new things. I'm going to take a pause right here really quickly, because also around this same time, Victoria mentioned something that I think is important to say about mental health and depression. So during this time, I also went through my own bouts of depression, and I don't think that's as normalized on MIT's campus as it should be. And so, you know, I was in, what's that office? Yeah, SQ, mental health, crying in Latari's office every other day, and that... Calm down. Calm down. I mean, it might have been, she played me, it's okay. It might have been every day. But that was something that just is part of my story, and I went through it, and I would never assume that other people in this room don't go through that, or haven't gone through that, or will go through that. So I just try to, whenever I can, mention it, normalize it. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's not something you shouldn't talk about, because if you don't talk about it, then everyone's going to keep that to themselves and struggle by yourself. And there's no reason for anyone in this room to do that. So back from that aside, senior year comes around, September comes around, and I get all these job offers at these companies that, again, I'm still working with the same coach who has deemed that I am smart enough for these jobs. And so still did not know what I wanted to do. It's September. Hypothetically, I would have my entire senior year to kind of explore these industries a little bit more, figure out what the best fit is for me, but I kind of feel that this is all I'm gonna get. Like, this is all I'm capable of, this is what I gotta work with, and I need to make a decision now. So I had, just give you an idea of how much I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had offers from Disney, Target to go back, Vanguard, Booz Allen. So that is entertainment, retail, finance, and consulting. None of those things are related. None of those things, I would be doing completely different things at each one of those companies, and I really didn't know what I wanted. But in my mind, it's September, and I'm like, okay, I need to lock this job down now, because I'm sure the semester's gonna go by, my GPA is gonna drop some more, and then it's gonna be even harder to get a job. So I said, let's go with it. So I ended up picking the Vanguard group, and I picked them particularly because they have a rotational program. So they give me a chance to rotate through 4 different departments. And so graduate, spend one more summer with the OUP, because why not, you know, love it. And then I go down to a suburb of Philadelphia to work for the Vanguard group. So the way the program works is you spend 3 months in each department. And the way my experience was is that every 3 months I found myself saying, yeah, I hated this. But I'm gonna like the next thing. Like, I just kept telling myself that. So the very first rotation, I was basically working in a call center. I knew I was gonna hate that before I started. Like, I swear this, I still tell my old manager this, they never told me that when I was hired. That was a surprise that they just kind of threw on you when you got there. But first rotation, worked in the call center. I did everything in my power to spend as little time on the phone as possible. I said I will help everybody else on this floor with their calls if I don't have to talk to people. That was just not the job for me. The second rotation, it was actually a really cool rotation, my second one. It was working with a team that basically they served as an outside chief investment officer for different nonprofits and different companies. So it was really cool work, and you got to do really impactful work working with nonprofits and colleges, some that were in Wisconsin, which was cool for me, just being able to give back to my home area. But at the end of the 3 months, I was like, you know, y'all were all really nice, and I enjoyed working with y'all, but I hate this too. So then, you know, my manager at this point is freaking out because I'm pretty much on the verge of quitting like every other week. And she was like, okay, well, what do you want? What do you want next? And I was like, well, you know, one time I took 100 at MIT, which is Java, and I really liked that. And she's like, okay, we'll find somewhere where we can do some coding. So they put me in a quant group. So this is a group that manages about, you know, 30 billion in assets through quantitative analysis. So you're doing a lot of coding and doing a lot of work with their data. That was actually really fun. I enjoyed it. But at the end of the 3 months, I had to ask myself, is this something I want to do for the next year? And I was like, nah, I don't like this either. And so at this point, my manager is like, you know, she's obviously measured by retention, is a big piece of it. And she's a good mentor of mine, and she's really supportive. But part of it is she didn't want me to leave. And so she's like, okay, let's go back to the basics. She's like, what did you do at MIT that you really loved? And I was like, I love leading NSBE. That was one of the most impactful experiences I had. I love that organization. I loved, you know, being president. That meant a lot to me. And she's like, okay, you like to lead. You're a leader. She's like, we're going to make you a leader. So my fourth and final rotation, she made me a supervisor of a data team. So she was like, ooh, let's get both of those things in there. And for those 3 months, you know, I really got to, you know, get to know my team and get to know the work. And I really got to flex my leadership capabilities. And it's hard being a young Black woman fresh out of college leading people who are 5-10 years your senior. That's not easy. And so coming out of that rotation, though, I really was like, yeah, I hate this too. And so, but I was like, this is the final stop. Out of all the experiences I've had, this was probably the best one. It presented different challenges. It presented personal challenges, and I knew I was gonna have to grow a lot as a leader, but I was like, this is where the bus will stop. So I launched in that role. I launched as a supervisor of a team of analysts, specifically with the investment data management group. So what we did was our team was responsible for making sure the accounting of about $2.5 trillion was just accurate. That's important for a lot of reasons, but the big reasons are regulation issues. And so it was important work to the company, but it wasn't important work to me. And so it was really hard. You know, my team wanted me to learn more about the job and understand all this other stuff. And I basically learned to the limit where I had to support them. But beyond that, I was like, I don't have any interest in spending my Friday nights here reading these regulations because I don't care. I'm not passionate about this. And, you know, the motto of the company is, you know, take a stand for all investors. And I had to have a conversation with my bosses. Like, I don't feel like I'm taking a stand for all investors. When I think all investors, I'm thinking low-income populations. I'm thinking people who are underrepresented in the stock market. And I say, I feel like we're serving rich white people. Like, that is the demographic that our company is serving, and I don't feel connected to that. And so that didn't go over well, but I mean, he, you know, bless his soul, he tried his best to support me and figure out ways that I could still be involved. So he got me involved with VITA, which is helping prepare taxes for low-income communities. So he helped me get involved with that. He helped me get involved with, you know, the Black Resource Group there. And so there's different ways that I tried to stay connected, but at the end of the day, I didn't feel I was doing great work. I mean, I was doing great work, but I didn't feel that I was doing impactful work or work that was meaningful to me. So just so happens he sent me to a conference here in Boston where I came up. It was a 3-day conference, Monday through Wednesday. And then, you know, surprise, surprise, Thursday and Friday was the NSBE conference. Now, y'all know I love NSBE. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to take some vacation time and stay for this NSBE conference. And then Shauna calls me, and Shauna was like, so the NSBE conference is coming up, and we want to have a reception and a booth and all these other things. She's like, you want to help out? And I was like, sure. You know, I'm already going to be up there. I love the OEOP. I love NSBE. Let's do this. So to sum that up, I took 2 vacation days, paid vacation days to work here at the NSBE conference for the OEOP. I manned that booth at the NSBE conference from, I'm not a morning riser, so about 10:30 a.m. about 10:30 a.m. to 5, all day Thursday, all day Friday, and help do a reception Friday night. And I loved it. Like, the fact that I was up here on my vacation and doing work that to me didn't feel like work, it was amazing. And so then I was complaining to Shauna about how much I hated my job. And Shauna was like, we have an opening here. It's for a program coordinator role for the MOSTEC program, which I got to work with in its first year. And she was telling me all the evolution that the program's gone through over the past, 5-6 years. And I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. No, thank you. And I said that because, again, that sense of inadequacy came creeping back. I don't have experience in nonprofit work. I don't have experience in program management. This is not my forte. But, I went home, and this is probably one of the better decisions I've made. And I thought about it some more, and I was like, you know what? I can't do this. Like, if Shauna thinks I can do it, or if the rest of the team thinks I can do it, then why shouldn't I think I can do it? So I applied a little under 2 years ago. I got here, and when I say I used to go to Vanguard every day and hate my job, I never have that feeling here. There are days where I feel tired. There are days where I'm frustrated, but there are never any days where I can say I don't truly love the work I do now and love the students I serve. And that's how it's been now for almost the past 2 years. And I can't imagine going back to anything where I'm not in a position like that. So now I'm here. I know y'all never make it to that side of campus, but E17, come on down. And I love the work I do. I work with over 100 students every summer who are underrepresented, who are low income, first gen, who really need opportunities like this to aspire. I just read a student's application the other day saying, she's a freshman at Columbia now. She had never even heard of Columbia before the MOSTEC program, just like I had never heard of MIT before the rights program, so I can relate to that. And it's really impactful. You have these students who remind me of my happy-go-lucky self when I was a senior in high school and I had not a care in the world, and they're inspiring. You can't help but work that closely with students who are so high-achieving and so hopeful for the impact that they're going to make in the world and not be inspired. And so on that vein, I did something that I never thought I could do, which was apply to grad school last fall. So I'm really happy that this fall I'll be getting my MBA at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. So, and that's where my story is now. But I'm, for the first time in the past 8 years, I feel really hopeful about what I can accomplish and what I can do when I get there.
We have time for some questions and answers, and I thought maybe I'd start us off with one question that at least some of you could address. So some of you mentioned that narrative we have in our heads that maybe we don't measure up, maybe somehow we're not good enough, or can't make it at places like MIT. And so I wondered, what are your antidotes, to that voice that I think we all have in our heads? What strategies have worked for you? And what can you share with the group about that?
All right. So I went through many of those moments, as Latari knows. And one key thing is just really having mentors, having somebody to tell you, yes, you can. I've been through it before. You'll be all right. I've seen this before. You're going to be okay. And Latari was one of those people for me. So just having somebody in your corner and saying, you're going to get through this. And then also being able to coach yourself as well, because it's all a mindset thing. When you find yourself thinking that you can't do something, you're not going to do it, right? But if you think that you can, then you're going to do it. It's all a mind game. That's how life works. So really being able to uplift yourself, and then on that token, being able to uplift others, because sometimes people, they just need that push, and then they can be where you are, and then it's a chain game, right? So being able to support your sisters, right? That's what MSK is all about. That's what BWA is all about. Actually putting some action on that. Yeah, you get busy. Everybody's busy. You're going to get busier throughout life. So just make that time to pamper yourself and pamper the women around you because they need it.
And I think a lot of the pressure for me with not feeling like I fit in was just about finding out that my interests didn't feel like MIT student interests. And like I had my, like during sophomore year, one of my professors, I went to office hours and he was like, oh, if you don't understand this, you can't be an engineer. And then and then he asked me who my advisor was, and a couple weeks later with my advisor, he was like, you're not gonna be able to get into grad school. And these are people who are supposed to be guiding me, and they're the only people that I know in my field. Like, I don't know, I don't have any mentors, or I didn't have any mentors in mechanical engineering besides my professors. And I think for me, I can like find strength in defiance. And that's like, Lataria she says this all the time, that like people can tell me like that the sun is good for me, but I'm not gonna listen to it until I decide that it is. And it's really true. Like I can't get my my strength from outside of myself. It has to be like, I have to decide that this is what I'm gonna believe in. And for me, when my professors told me that, it was just like, I'll show you, which is probably not a great way to, live your life, but yeah. It is what it is, but it was just like, I got that strength from realizing that every single day I felt like I was acting out just by existing on this campus. Like it just felt like I was just protesting by sitting in class. Like somebody's like, oh, I used to wear my like fro out all the time and like have a little flower in it. And somebody's like, oh, I can't see behind, like, I can't see past your hair. And I'm like, girl, well, you should have got a better seat then. Like, what is that? Like, so that kind of like, I started to use that as like a power, like and it was just like a defense mechanism. And by the end of my time at MIT, I was just like kind of fighting my way through. Like, I don't care what you have, like, it didn't matter. Like, it's like, I'm here. So what do you, it was just and I think that was me trying to get to take my power back. Like, you can't tell me who I am. You just can't do that. And so that was how I started to kind of deal with not feeling like I fit. It's just like, well, it doesn't matter if I don't fit. You can't take me out of here. Like, it's like, it is what it is. But yeah.
I'm gonna, sorry, that was funny. Brings back so many memories.
I know, it's just it comes back. Dextina, she was a firecracker.
I'm gonna echo a little bit what Tiera said, but I think one of the things that I've learned that it's okay to be selfish. So I have some of those people who I know if I reach out to them, they will be my cheerleaders, and vice versa as well. So like I definitely know the minute I got like my test scores for my GMAT, I texted Margo, and Margo was like, "Yay!" And like people that you need people like that in your corner who are gonna support you and make you feel accomplished and make you feel like you've done something. And I think recognizing that if you expect that from others, you also need to be able to reciprocate and do that as well.
I'll just try to briefly add. I think just building off of your experiences, like I said before, like a really important lesson to me was learning like this idea that, this too shall pass. Everything has a time and a season. Like, your time of like being the noob, the beginner, the like, that's just part of the process. It's always part of the process. Just like high school, you started out that way and then you came out, hopefully a little higher. You start at MIT, you came, and you hopefully come out a little, better. And then you start all over again as like, the fresh baby somewhere. So I think doing that and being able to look back and say like, oh, wow, I made it through MIT. I made it through that course I never thought I was going to make, that I really thought I was going to fail. Like, and I still got into med school. I still like did things, and I went from, being really uncertain and unsure that I would ever accomplish what I was trying to get, and doing that. And I think it's even the silly things, like I became an avid salsa dancer, which I still am, Latin dance. starting at MIT. And I think looking at that, that was something that I could just do for the fun of it, even though I was really bad at it for at least like 1.5 years. And then, but like just going at it like day by day, getting better and better. And I realized like people don't see, every step of the way. All they ever see is like you at the top, you like shining on the dance floor or doing whatever you do, stunting, which you're like, because she's hearing her, we're hearing her tell her struggle, senior year, but all I heard was like, I got 1 offer, 2 offer, 3 offer, 4 offer, 5, and I'm like, so that's what we see. We see people stunting but like we don't know the struggle that they're doing along the way, or the joy that they're sometimes experiencing along the way. And so I think really seeing that, being able to reflect upon that for myself, it really reassured me now when I meet new challenges that this is just part of the process. I won't be, really bad at this, hopefully, forever. Like, hopefully I'll be, someone who might be able to hang out in the artificial intelligence space and, like, do these things that I see, all these other people are doing. And it's, watching that process. I'm sure, like, you guys are all experienced at MIT when things that don't make sense day by day, semester by semester, they make sense. And so that was really important for me, and like just being able to have that in my mind.
So I have struggled with imposter syndrome for as long as I can remember. So I have a lot of attempted remedies for it. So the first of which is vital to me that a lot of the other panelists have touched on is the need for mentors. And so when I first stepped on campus, I thought I was hot. I came out of high school, I thought I was hot. Hot. You feel me? I came out of high school and I was like, top GPA, 4-sport varsity athlete, like all this, right? And then I got to interphase and all of that got snatched away from me in 2 months. Like immediately. And then that's when it started to kick in, like, you might not be prepared for this. And what are you going to do if you are not prepared for this? And so one of the first people I sat down with is one of the Institute Chief Equity Officers, Ed Bershinger, and he was the department head of physics at the time. And he set me down and was like, you're going to struggle here, but the main thing is that you keep trying. And you take it with a grain of salt coming from somebody coming that high up, right? It's like, what are you talking about? You're the head of the #1 physics department in the world. So he told me, hey, when I was your age, I didn't even get into MIT. I got rejected. I had to go to the other technical institute on the other side of the country, and they told me. Hey, he said it, not me. So he said he attended Caltech, and while there, his advisor looked him dead in his face and was like, you don't have what it takes to be a physicist. And this is the person who is the head of the physics department who has made unimaginable impact on the topic of theoretical physics being told that. And so hearing that was like, okay, this is good to know that people high up encounter trials. And it's so invigorating to hear people sharing them. This panel is so beautiful, not only because I know everybody personally, because we're talking to brilliant people who are sharing their missteps. And you rarely get to hear back to back to back, like, oh man, they struggled with depression, me too. And so my other mentor, Dr. Chanda Prescott-Weinstein, she is forever in my corner rooting for me. Just like Jazmyne said, the necessity for cheerleaders. Whenever I'm hurting, I call Chanda and she always makes time. And you realize that a lot of the people you look up to went through the exact same experiences as you. I'm a Black person in physics, and other people who identify as women have also started doctoral programs and dropped out because they hated it, because they were unhappy, because the programs were sexist, racist, homophobic, whatever. So I realized that by admitting that I'm hurting, that I can also realize that other people are too, just by having the courage to share that. So another way I practice self-care is by admitting when I'm feeling some type of way. A lot of the power and confidence that I've gained is by being vulnerable, by admitting, hey, I'm depressed. Hey, I suffer from severe anxiety, and getting help on that. And not being afraid to admit, hey, I take medication for this because it's serious. Like, hey, this doesn't make me less of a person because I have these things to deal with. The next thing is also mentees. And so one way to really feel good about yourself is to talk to people who look up to you. Because there's nothing like having cheerleaders on both sides of the spectrum, right? You have somebody who's done it already, who's saying, you got this. And then you have somebody who's trying to get to where you are saying, you totally have this. Like somebody who still sees the good talent, the raw talent in you, who's rooting for you. So I have a couple mentees who are going through very similar experiences that I am, who have constantly been in my corner, who talk to me about what they're feeling, and I'm able to say, like, oh, you went through that, me too. Like, oh, like you had that weird instance in the bathroom where somebody misgendered you and then it was really uncomfortable. Hey, me too. But I'm in this position so that the next person doesn't have to experience that. And then the third piece is experiences. So over time, you will realize that you have done some really incredible stuff, and you have to just feel your swag on that. Like there are moments where like you really have to look like everybody has moments that they're proud of. And so for me, my two that I first thought of when I was writing about this was getting into grad school. So I too had a whack GPA, and so a lot of people told me as well, like, you're not going to get into grad school. Wait, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, you have all these extracurriculars. You did a couple cool internships, but that GPA, you're going to struggle with that. And so it was very, very validating to get accepted into every single graduate program I applied to. And so what can people say to that, right? And so then attending Wisconsin, they have a qualifying exam. So you take classes for 2 years, and at the end of it, you have to take a 4-hour written exam drilling you on everything you should know about these topics as a medical physicist. And so it was extremely validating to me that my classmates did a lot to prevent me from succeeding, explicitly excluding me from study groups, having all 4 of the minority students being in the same lab group when the other 16 people were in separate lab groups. Like, how did the black person, the Turkish person, the Indian person, and the Chinese person all end up in the same group? And people not noticing that and thinking it's a coincidence, you know? And so to go through that and then to take this exam and to pass every single one of the 5 sections was just like, okay, like you might have something going there, Margo. you might have something going for you there. And then the last step is the way you really figure out your clout is by taking risks. You know, you never know how strong you are until you move up to that next weight class. And so for me, it was like, all right, I got accepted into these grad schools. Will they let me change programs? All right, I'm at Wisconsin, but will Berkeley let me come back after I decline them? And so knowing that saying it now sounds unreal, but it really took a really big risk and being vulnerable and saying, I am unhappy here enough to the point where I'm willing to make a risk, because what did that Victoria said? It was something really, really powerful. I don't have to do things that don't make me happy. And the last 3 years of my life, I would never trade my Wisconsin experience, but they taught me how to put my happiness first, even if that means walking away from something. And so mentors, mentees, experiences, risks, and self-care are my antidotes to imposter syndrome.
Okay. So are there other questions? Do we need to have a mic for use one of these, or, okay. So any other questions?
Thank you so much. This is incredible, and it's very vulnerable and wonderful to share your stories and the real stories, not just the successes. I'm working now with a high school who's trying to make a difference to attract more underrepresented minority students to even want to go to that high school. It's a lot like an MIT, but there seems to be so many challenges. And we formed a partnership fund, and one of the things we're doing is K-12 outreach. And one of the things we're trying to do is encourage families to even be interested in this high school. It's a governor school, but we're also trying to figure out, what do you do to make a difference? How do you just change the game? How do you change the numbers? if any of you have any advice, it would be so welcome, because I left my Booz Allen corporate job after 33 years because I wasn't loving it, and I want to do this now, but I don't know exactly where to start.
I guess I feel like maybe Margo might even speak on this more, but when I was in my position, even every stage, like I came from a more mixed environment, like there were black people, there were not many Latinos in Midwest, unfortunately, Minnesota, but there was, there were white people, so it wasn't like MIT's kind of looked like this. But I would say when I was doing my application process, it was really about, will I be comfortable at whatever place I go to? Like, I would not have had the balls or any sort of, gonads to go to University of Wisconsin. I say kudos for that risk, but I know I wouldn't have been able to do it because it was so important to me when I was on the interview trail to see that there was community there for me, that the people who were interested in things that I was interested in, that, had experience and backgrounds like me, were happy. And if I saw people that were miserable, if I saw people who weren't even like of my style at all, I wasn't gonna go. And so I say when people like want to diversify their spaces, you gotta be also asking, how are we gonna be ready to support them? Like, how are we gonna have them not be isolated, alone, leaving, dropping out? Like, and that's what really hits me when I think about how you think about, okay, so I go to University of Chicago. Our med school has been getting increasingly diverse, our biological science division, and I say it really just is like a feedback loop. Like, they see people like them doing things, happening, making a difference, like, because we were on the South Side, and that usually attracts minorities, like the idea that you're giving back to the community and things like that. And our latest class is like over 25%, underrepresented minority. Like, it's like Wakanda up in here, like, and I think it's really the idea when we come and we plan the like events that there's going to be a community there supporting them, and I think that's really what draws people.
Other questions?
Well, hello, you all. Thank you so much for speaking. My name's Abi Noto. I'm a current freshman here at MIT.
Ooh, shout out to you. I know.
And I'm also thinking about going into physics. But I think a concern I have is possibly going into a field where I may not enjoy the work I do one day or the environments I'm in. And I look at other majors and I'm like, I would really love to do this, but physics is just what I'm passionate about. So, do you guys have any advice about choosing what field you go into as an undergrad? Yeah.
So in the physics realm, I think something that MIT does not do justice about is telling you what you can do with a physics degree. And so MIT physics is very heavily theoretical based, and therefore you don't know medical physics exists. You don't know that physicists work at corporations like, what was the name you worked at, Dextina? Shinola. Like, you don't know physicists are at Vanguard. And so I think something that is important is utilizing the connections that exist on campus to understand what is possible for a physics major. And so one of the ways that I did that was through the OME and their IACME partners. Is attending, it's so interesting, going to other institutions, you realize how much MIT leveraged the resources they have to make the students' experiences more accessible. And so, for example, I'm at UC Berkeley now. And so the OME, when I was here, did these networking hours with different companies. And these are now run by students at Berkeley. And to their defense, they still exist, but are they as well organized as they are if you have full-time staff members doing this? And so they're not as effective, and therefore you don't get as much out of it. And so going to these places and talking to people whose jobs are to recruit you, they therefore have a better knowledge of what somebody like you can do. And also, what I realized is that what Jazzmyne also learned, sorry to speak for you, but one thing I learned from Jazzmyne, from her experiences, is the ability to learn how to market yourself with your skills. And so how did Jazzmyne get consulting, finance, all those different types of jobs is not because necessarily she had skill set, not that she didn't have experience in them. It's that she made her skill set applicable to it. And so that's what a lot of these sorts of positions are about, because nobody has 10 years of experience straight out of college in these jobs. It's all about, did what you do, is it applicable? And also, like, a lot of it's just like passion. And so in graduate school, one thing that they don't tell you when you're applying is that it's less so about the GPAs and the test scores. It's a lot about how hard you're willing to work. And so on paper, if you just look at the degrees I have, you assume that I did really well, but I didn't. I struggled every single moment of my MIT career. There were so many moments I sat in the OME talking to Dean Creighton, talking to Miss Cheryl, talking about how this isn't for me, how physics isn't for me. But the main thing is they care about in grad school and in these positions, your ability to fail and keep going. Grad school is, you're there for 5+ years getting a doctorate degree to do research on a topic that you probably won't solve in that time that you're there. But the point is, are you willing to keep working at it? Are you able to still make some sort of progress? And will you not give up? And so that was the difference between the people who did really well in undergrad, who, like, because you know, like, there's the people who, like, you believe get everything every time it's taught. Like the people who are like in class, like, oh, and they ask that really hard question that's unrelated. I realized one of the things I learned so late in the game is that a lot of people here are just faking it. And you learn that so late. You learn it so late. Those same people who are asking the obnoxious questions are with me in office hours crying about not understanding the material. And so it's a lot about using what is available here to you to do exactly what you want, because you should never have to compromise on what makes you happy. If you want to do physics and you like it, do it, and we can find you a job doing whatever you want with that physics degree.
I'm going to take the liberty to ask another question of the group. So in the process of discovering and defining who you are, how have you negotiated family expectations and community expectations, perhaps, if they were at odds with your sense of who you were trying to become, who you are? And I'm not just talking about academic expectations either, but maybe ideas about how you ought to live your life. So maybe some of you can address that.
That's a really good question. Well, I know for me, my dad has always had the expectation that, 1, I would have gone to Spelman, and 2, I would have gone on to do the dual degree with Georgia Tech, and I would have gotten a PhD as well. So those are the academic expectations. And then as far as getting married, oh, geez, he just lost it. He was like, well, can you wait until after you get your grad degree? Or, oh my God, don't change your last name. And all of those sorts of things. So I had a lot of expectations on me and my family, because I was like their star child, right? Because my parents, my mom, she did go to college, but she didn't go on to do grad school. And then my dad, he's in construction, so he didn't even go to college. He went to trade school. So there was just so much pressure on me, because I'm the youngest as well. My siblings, they had already graduated on with their personal lives. They're fine. But I was like the last one. They had a chance to just go ahead and mold and push out. And and so the main thing that I had to deal with was just learning what I want to do, what I'm passionate about, what I see myself doing. I had to just learn myself. And the way that I did that was just actually taking time to just make some decisions about my life. So I was like, do I want to go straight to grad school? Do I want to go straight to working with a company? Do I want to do research? What do you want to do, Tiera? So I took some time and I wrote down some options. And I've realized that what I wanted to do was not exactly the pathway that I had been thinking about since I was 11 years old, because I was just always stuck on aerospace only. But then I realized, okay, I really care about the community. I want to do a nonprofit. I want to uplift people. I want to be able to make a change outside of work. And then inside of work, I also wanted some flexibility. So this kind of goes into setting expectations and negotiating with your management, your upcoming team, with your job, making sure that it's clear of what you want to do. So you have to communicate how you see yourself in the future, what your passions actually are overall, not just the work, but also outside of what you do on a daily basis. So do you want to get involved in some of the organizations in the company, or do you want to venture out into your own organization and maybe you want their financial support for it and stuff like that? You have to be really, really open, and you have to be daring so much so that you follow what you actually want to do. And that's scary. It sounds so much simpler than it actually is because you're taking a risk, right? Not just any sort of risk. It's a risk on your own future, your own self. But it's worth it because would you rather be bored and just getting by, or do you want to actually just follow your passions? So find yourself and don't get too frustrated with yourself because you're not just going to be like, oh, I know exactly what I want to do. Be able to, fail and get back up. Just keep trying and you'll stumble your way through it, or maybe you'll just breeze through whatever. There's so many different pathways to get to what you want to do. So just, keep on keeping on.
So a lot of steps along the way, my mom started to find out what I was up to. I think, when I was, throughout my whole life, I've been in charge of parent-teacher meetings. I've been in charge of my own academia. My path, that was up to me. My mom was like, you're going to college. You're going to be the best at whatever. This is going to be amazing. And that was the guidance. It was that. And then I went off and took that and ran with it. And so when I got into MIT, my mom didn't know what MIT was. And she wasn't excited until I showed her that there was no parental contribution. I showed her that 0, and she was like, oh, my God, I did it great. So it was my mom did something like that, her version. And I think when I graduated high school, my mom moved back to Guyana with my little sister, and so they were there, and I was in Massey and felt very alone and felt like without a home base. And while my mom was out there, I didn't realize that she was getting, when she started to talk about MIT with people, they started to, be really excited. They're like, oh my God, your daughter goes where? This is nuts. And so they started to shape my mom's idea of what I was up to. And other than that, she was just like, yeah, she goes to some college in Massachusetts, and that's, it's cool. And I think my mom had a similar experience when I graduated and told her that I was moving to Detroit. It was just like, I don't really understand what you're doing. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that my mom had us young and wasn't able to go to college either, or wasn't able to go to college, and just didn't have access to the same opportunities as I did growing up. And because of that, my mom, whenever my mom told me something, it was always coming from the perspective of, I want the best for you, but I do not understand you. And I think now, we've definitely come a really, really, really long way. Just because I made the decision to have us start to understand each other and start to, just jive a lot better, hopefully. And last January, we ended up going to Guyana to work on a project that I got funded here. I finessed some money from some people and was like, cool, going to Guyana. And and so we went for a week, and this was the first time that my mom saw me at the same time with everyone else, the way that other people see an MIT grad. It's just you are to a lot of people you're a superhero to them. It's just I don't even know what you went through. I don't know what it means, but that's amazing that you did that. Come work with us. And I think that was the first time that my mom got to see that in real time and kind of appreciate that. And so my path and my decisions are always shaped by my family, and that I want the best for them. And the reason that I'm here is because I want the best for them. And they, my family sacrificed so much to get me to this point that it's we're in this together. This is a unit. When I win, you win. That's how it is. but it wasn't until much more recently that I think they started to understand what I was up to. My mom was like, I don't really get why you're crying right now. Like during undergrad, I was like, I don't really get why you're crying, but you're the best. Like I don't, like you were valid. This is nothing. I don't get it. Like you're fine. And that kind of blind faith actually is very helpful. Like sometimes. That's terrible. That sounds really bad. Like you shouldn't believe in me, but thank you. No, that's not what I mean. But like my experience is always shaped by wanting better and wanting more for my family. And that's a part of why I wanted to go back to school. It's a part of why I chose to be on the East Coast, because they moved back to Brooklyn, so we're closer again. And so the effect isn't necessarily that like they're telling me their hopes and dreams for me. It's just that my family just wants the best for me and may not always understand what I'm going through or what I'm up to, but at the end of the day, they just really, really want what's best for me. Yeah.
Just add a couple of things. I'd say I saw a lot of people do a lot of different things in terms of my peers and how they navigated their parent-family relationships. I say it's kind of like what Margo was saying earlier about you gotta sometimes also take a risk in your relationship. Like, I always thought it was hilarious, like how I'd be like, I've generally always been an independent person, you know, very kind of similar. Like I directed my path mostly, but when I came to MIT, I just like, you know, was doing my own thing, you know, kind of really calm, typically, but silly. And then I would go back home for the breaks, and I would like turn back into this like child, and my parents would turn back into these like overly protective, like you can't go out, like you don't know what I've been up to at MIT. Like I've been in these streets, man. Well, you know, I'm a very responsible person. You know, I was doing mass abs and and so it was like realizing like these environments were like putting us back into like these roles, and I realized I had to take a risk in evolving my relationship with my parents. And that just the things that I wanted to do, like when I first wanted to leave the country, you know, my parents aren't like the traveling type. I mean, they came from Nigeria, that was a big deal, but like we weren't like ones who would travel, and they're like, what are you going to do in Mexico? Like it's like other, you know, violence there, and it had to take some trust. But I was more the type of person who's like, I'll like do now, ask forgiveness later. So I like told them also like a couple days before I was gonna go. And they got used to that very often, because that's how I did a number of trips, or risk. And like eventually, even relationships that are kind of like stagnant, or they seem like they can never be a certain way, you often see they will evolve. Like people learn to trust you. People like learn to think, oh, like she knows what she's doing with her life. So my parents also don't usually understand like this MD-PH thing. Like I've explained it many, many times to them, like you're still in school, but whatever. But you know, they learn to trust me, and like that I kind of know where I'm going with this. And so I think that's an important thing, just to like apply some risk to your relationships. The last thing I'll also say is there's you also touched on it too, or actually you did. You have to also free expectations of yourself. Like, let's see, I was in a therapy group this past year at my school, and I think we talked about this thing that I think really affects a lot of women, minority women of color, just our age group, especially like when you're about 25 or whatever. You get to this idea, like all these expectations you had as a child, you know, either that you got from your parents, that you had as a teenager, that you had at the start of college, that like, and you built like this, you know, 10-year plan for yourself, your 5, like your dreams, you know, that you like lay out, that you have to stick with that from throughout. Like you come in as like, I'm gonna be a math major at MIT, and like it's complete failure if you don't graduate in math, or if like you don't do this thing, even though you found out that you hate math. Like, so we get really rigid in our expectations, and I find that so many of even just me or my friends that are my age, that they have to go through this process of freeing themselves of their childhood expectations, especially when it comes to relationships and life, like goals, like when am I gonna get a house, when am I gonna get married, when am I gonna have kids? Like, you know, my expectation at, you know, 16, or even when I started at MIT was like, I would have kids by now. do I want kids right now? No. But like, I was like, hell no. I'm like, I have friends having kids now. I'm like, but no. Like, and so it's really, letting yourself reevaluate, what you want in life, what are your expectations for your future, letting yourself have the room to grow. And I think that can be really, really hard when you've had a vision for certain pieces of your life to go a certain way, or other people have had very certain rigid visions for you.
Just real quick to add to that, for me, I've definitely struggled with negotiating family relationships the more I've become like more in tune with myself and my needs and my identity. And so what it really came down to is I really had to sit one day and realize that the expectations people have for me are just that, expectations. So like, are they the ones at MIT? Are they the ones at UC Berkeley? Like, can you really set expectations for me if you are not in my shoes experiencing what I'm experiencing? And from that point forward, I really made it a mission, and it really came full circle at Wisconsin to live in my truth, whatever that means. And if that meant having uncomfortable conversations, then so be it. Victoria mentioned earlier is like you will always be in a state of transition, and that includes relationships with family. And so that's something like I feel like around your mid-20s is when you really start to transition your relationships, especially as it relates to your parents. And so for me, something I've had to learn is just I'm gonna love who I love, I'm gonna look the way I look, and I will always unapologetically be myself. And if you can't handle that, like parents included, then like sometimes it's like, so what? Like, and that's hard to do because you love your parents, you love your family, you love the people who made this possible. But at the end of the day, we as minority, gender minority, racial minorities, all go through so much that I realized that why add another level of discomfort in your personal time? Therefore, I don't. And that's okay. Like, if you don't respect my pronouns, then like I don't have to talk to you. Like, if you don't, and as it relates to academia, you don't have to agree with me. Like, you don't have to agree with my ideals. You don't have to like approve of what I do. But over time, I learned that I went from questioning if I deserve this spot and if I could be unapologetically myself to you owe me this. I deserve to be here, and therefore I will continue to take up this space. And science claims that everything's objective, that as long as you're coming to the right answer, they don't care how you look. And so I'm putting that to the test every single day. I'm coming in here with my natural curls, with my double nose rings, with my tattoos, with my facial hair, and I'm just like, if y'all claim that this is what it's about, then show me. And that's how I live.
I just want to touch on one last piece about family expectations. So this is something that I've been struggling with probably for the past, honestly, probably since I was at MIT, which is, so my mom got a bachelor's. I don't know why I say it like that. My mom went to college, and she was the only person in our family to go to college, still is. So growing up, I constantly watched, well, okay, yeah, me too now. You're right. But growing up, I constantly watched people like treat my mom as an ATM, and that was like my family's expectations of her. And so I don't know why I thought it'd be different, but it's not. And so for me, my family's expectations have been a lot about, I don't think it's a sense of you owe this, because I don't. But I think there is that thought process that you have it, so you should share it. And there are times when, yeah, I don't mind doing things. I will send my cousin money for a baby crib, or I'll help out to pay a bill. I'll do these things occasionally. But I think as far as my relationship with my family, it's also made it really hard to pick up the phone when certain people call. There are just certain names that will flash across my screen, and I have to ask, is it my birthday or is it a holiday? And if the answer is no, then they're probably calling for money. And so that, for me, hasn't, I wouldn't say strained my relationship with my family, but it's definitely changed it in a way that I'm really excited to go to University of Chicago because it's an hour and a half drive from my family, but it's also concerned because it's an hour and a half drive from my family. And so going and dealing with that and figuring out, how to balance, when I genuinely want to help out and when to say no has been something that I've dealt with since undergrad, and something that I'm sure I'll continue to deal with.
I guess. So, is that okay? Yeah, we have maybe a few minutes, and then I think we'll wrap up, and hopefully the panelists can stick around and talk to people, individually. But yeah.
Adrian Walter Ginsburg. I have a PhD in urban studies. 1983, before your mothers were born.
All right.
Many of you. I just wanted to say one thing, that one of my advisors said to me when I applied for some fellowship. I didn't get it, and he said to me, this was Gary Marks, if anybody here knows who that is. He did his dissertation in Berkeley on the riots in 1968, so that might be relevant to anybody who's interested in Berkeley. He said he wants to write a book one day on the failures of successful people. In other words, people who end up being very successful, everybody has failures in their background. That I didn't get that fellowship that year, I actually did get it the next year. And these are things, you just roll with it. You go on, you keep on, you carry on. I have a hell of a lot more to say, but I don't have the time. This isn't the forum. But just keep on remembering that of all the things that happen, the resilience and, success is every time you get knocked down, you just keep standing up. That's it. And I have to say, I am totally blown away by the talent and intelligence and the sheer brain power in this room. Blown away.
Can we,
Yeah, I was just gonna quickly say, so you gotta go. My name is Shauna. I was here a long time, and I just have to say I'm inspired. You're completely inspiring. And my only note to add to your advice is to find your home. And I've gone to several universities, and one is right down the street from where I work now, but I find that MIT is my home. So randomly people say, she's just gonna show up. And I will, because I see your names, your faces, your stories inspire me every day. So keep doing it.
Hey y'all. So I've been, I don't know if you've realized this, I've been at MIT. August next year will be 10 years. So I know the lives of all of these young women, and like right here, it's amazing to see everything that all of you are doing. And if I say something wrong, correct me. But here's what I want you to know. You are powerful. You are strong. I actually just got inspired to do something by listening to you. Like really, you just motivated me to think, okay, well yeah, I can do that thing. Why am I holding back? So your stories, your journeys, keep sharing them, because you're not just inspiring people of your generation or the generation to come. You're even inspirational to those of us who are already working in this space. And so keep doing what you're doing. I really love seeing all of you, and I'm so glad you came. And thank you for stopping by today, Margo. Thank you, Dextina. Anybody else who haven't stopped by?
I stopped. You were on a call.
So I feel like there was shade in there somewhere.
I stopped by. Both of them were on a call.
Early flight, but yeah. So just want to say it's amazing to see you and keep telling your stories and keep doing what you do. And what's really phenomenal about this is this is like the beginning. Like you haven't even begun. You just to change the world in the ways you're going to do. So yeah, I'm inspired and thank you.
Thank you for inviting us. It's an
Thank you.
honor.
Thank you.
So let's everybody thank you.